So moving on to a new medicine now, and if our previous couple were tremendously horrible children to be around, Positilla is the exact opposite. Well, for most of us. Depends how you like about sooky, weepy, sensitive people who want lots of attention, but they're lovely if they're getting attention from you. Positilla, really commonly used medicine, very commonly used in children. There's typically a phase that most kids go through where homeopaths will say that they're going through the Positilla phase. It's a medicine that you can think of using very, very frequently, very, very commonly in particular stages of life and in particular stages of childhood in particular. This is what's known now as anemone pratensis, or what sometimes called Positilla pratensis. This is the pusk flower or the wind flower, and it's called that because it grows in environments where it's kind of mountainous kind of areas, where it grows in fields, but it's exposed to a lot of wind, so it's got to kind of be able to move back and forth and gets blown around in the wind. So one of its common names is the wind flower. It fits into the Ranunculacea family, the Ranunculales order, and we make the tincture in homeopathy from the whole fresh plant. This is the medicine which is very commonly used in herbalism, and for a whole range of different things, but if you look at the kind of symptoms they're prescribing for, herbalists are using it for the same sorts of situations that a homeopath would. Things like headaches, for tension, for insomnia, for hyperactivity, big female hormonal medicine, dysmenorrhea, ovarian and uterine pains, ovaries or also testes, inflammation, amenorrhea, scanty menses, and it is contraindicated during pregnancy and lactation for herbal uses, so you may find that homeopathic use is more appropriate at those times because we don't have the same issues with those contraindications. If we look at the pharmacology a little bit, protoanemone is the active ingredient. It's mutagenic. It's also strongly antibacterial, antifungal. So on contact, you can get severe allergic dermatitis, itching, blistering, rashes. It can cause paralysis of the central nervous system, gastrointestinal disturbances, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, as well as nephritis or kidney inflammation. There's a very definite affinity with the mucous membranes, producing catarrhal responses, evidenced by thick mucoid discharges, and this is like a big keynote in homeopathy for using Positilla. Thick, yellow, moving towards greenish kind of mucus discharges, thick green snotty noses we'd often think of Positilla for. Antispasmodic nervine, having a special influence to the eyes, the ears, the urinary tract, the uterus and the prostate, and again big reproductive focus in this medicine, especially female reproductive but also male. Heinemann published 1,153 symptoms by taking moderate doses of this substance along with the symptoms of 6 other male and unknown number of female provers. And that's kind of interesting. I'd like to just point that out for a second, because when we look into the Materia Medica, Positilla is very, very strongly described as a female-focused medicine because they're soft and they're sensitive and they're weeping and they're emotional and all these things which have historically been associated as women symptoms. And it's kind of good to refute that a little bit, because actually most of the proving symptoms, all this soft, weepy, sensitive sookiness, came from Hahnemann and a bunch of his male mates using the herbal doses of the substance. So it's, I'd like to point that one out to people. Robinson, in the 1880s, used 30C and 200C during his trial with 8 provers. 1978, Clover did a reproving using 3X on 31 female and 21 male provers. And there's a whole bunch of clinical observations as well from Herring, Coulter, Manglivori in particular have really contributed a lot of information on this medicine. If we look at some of the themes or the situations described by different authors, Sankaran says Positilla's feeling is they will survive if they're soft and gentle, not hard and rigid. So if we think about it like the plant that's getting blown around in the wind flower, their way of coping is just being able to blow back and forth, because if they try to be too rigid, the plant will get broken. Changeability with softness, molds herself to what others want, malleable, no one pattern, even their pains and aches which are wandering and shifting. So emotionally they can have this, I guess, lack of rigidity. They'll fit in with what other people want and go what's happening around them. Extreme versions, you'll see people talk about with, they've had a client who was a member of an extreme cult, but they fit in really nicely in that environment because there's people telling them exactly what to do and when to do it and how to do it. And also their physical symptoms, not that fixed. Pains in their knee, and then there's the ankle, and it's in the elbow, and it moves all around the place. Weeps easily and relieved by weeping and consolation. Your client starts sobbing in the consultation room, especially if it seems like excessive and inappropriate for whatever they're talking about. Positilla is one of the things we'd think of in that situation. Is hot, cannot live without fresh air, wilts in a warm room. Again, like the windflower, likes to be out in the fresh air. The same thing with our symptoms in Positilla. There, lots of their symptoms in whole different areas of the body are often say they'll feel better once they go out in the fresh air rather than feel worse when they're inside in kind of a closed environment. Attracted to dogmas, spiritual communities, likely to change from one dogma to another, liking environments where someone tells them what to do and how to do it, when to do it, and takes the burden of those decisions off of them is something very much associated with pulsatilla. So if we look at the symptoms a little bit, so this is a medicine which you're very commonly going to think about based on mental symptoms because the mental symptoms are so strongly described in the Materia Medica. Forsaken feeling, often expressed in a need for attention. So this is a medicine we may commonly use in children, say when that second child comes along and suddenly they feel abandoned or forsaken or even jealous, and so they start behaving in ways which are designed to get them more attention, particularly if they start getting crying and getting really sad and doing that very emotional batting the eyelids kind of stuff to try to get attention from people. That's a very pulsatilla kind of reaction. They can do anything to fulfill that need. Consolation ameliorates. These are folks where if they're telling you how sick they feel and they start crying and you say, oh, they're there, it's going to be fine, they're going to love that because they like someone consoling them, like someone telling them they're going to be alright. They'll go to that friend who they know is going to give them a big cuddle and a cup of warm tea, and they'll feel so much better after they've spoken to their friend Roger or whoever it is. They can be very yielding, like a lack of rigidity, like the windflower that gets blown along. They tend to go along with what's important to other people and do things that other people may do. So in relationships, you may often find a pulsatilla type person is attracted to someone who can be quite hard or dogmatic or demanding or authoritarian even, because they actually kind of like fitting into that situation. Emotional, sympathetic, weeps easily. Lots of weeping in the Materia Medica. Often mild, but they can be irritable. They can be mild and sensitive, but if they're not getting what they want, they can be quite a demanding irritability which will develop. Changeableness of their moods, weeping 1 minute, laughing the next, moving back and forth between different emotional states very quickly. Timidity, blushes easily. They've got a tremendous sensitivity to their skin. They blush and blush quite quickly. I used to be very mean. I'm still very mean, but an example of me being mean. There's a lovely lady who used to work at the college with us, who was just a textbook beautiful example of pulsatilla. Like, she'd walk into a room and all homeopaths would know she's pulsatilla because she so looks like what a pulsatilla looks like. And so I used to take her into classroom lectures with me and stand her in front of the students and explain and describe her physical appearance and say, hey, this is how you can recognise a pulsatilla type person. And it was tremendously generous and nice of her to do that. I was a little bit concerned that perhaps the yielding pulsatilla nature meant that she was unable to say no to me, so I kind of tried to give her a lot of opportunities to not do this if she didn't want to do it. Hopefully she wasn't thinking the whole time she didn't want to do it. But I'd say to people, oh, she's so pulsatilla, and she'd straight away flush and she'd blush. She's got that like very fine, very transparent kind of skin that gets red and flushed very easily, almost like people who look embarrassed easily. That's a pulsatilla kind of reaction. Can be tremendously jealous, like that child who the second child comes along and suddenly they're not the centre of the world anymore, and so they can start really demanding more attention. That's a pulsatilla kind of reaction. Irritability before menses, a strong female hormonal medicine in homeopathy. There can be a fear of men, in particular if it's men is the opposite sex. Fear of dark heights, narrow places, things which are a bit scary and frightening to them. Fixed ideas, dogma, so it can be a kind of religious attachment to dogma, or praying, which again goes along with much the same thing. If we look at the physical generalities, so the changeability of symptoms is a big thing. If you start asking about their bowel symptoms, for example, and they say, oh, I've got diarrhea today, but yesterday I had constipation, the day before that I had this, and it's always different. It's like every time you speak to them, the symptoms changed. That's a changeableness of symptom, which by itself is an indication for think of something like pulsatilla. Big hormonal disturbances is a massive female health medicine. We won't talk about that so much in this session, but big female hormonal medicine. Warm-blooded, they can be quite warm, but very much aggravated by heat. They don't want to be inside where the heater is. They want to be outside in the cool, fresh air. They can be worse in summertime, better in wintertime. They can also be chilly, but even when they're chilly, they're still aggravated by heat. Aggravation from sun in a warm room, lots of female health related aggravations, aggravation of menses, pregnancy, menopause, suppressed menses, again periods of change. Like change is a key word with pulsatilla, so you may often use it in children around puberty. Aggravation from getting the feet wet, it's kind of an interesting symptom. People go get standing cold water, for example, and get sick as a result of that. Aggravation around twilight. Amelioration outside in the open air, big symptom. Amelioration from cold applications, big symptom. Amelioration from slow motion, so just gently moving around. Wandering pains, again, changeable, moves around the body. Ailments from measles, so there's been a history of kind of infectious diseases, especially measles, and they've never been well since that. You can think of pulsatilla as kind of a post-viral sort of a medicine. Big keynote, bland, yellow, greenish discharges. Those thick, goopy, yellow-greenish, sinus infections, head colds, even kind of earaches when you start to get kind of greenish discharge. That second and third stage in particular of an acute infection, when it starts to get green and yellow and thick and kind of bacterial sort of infections come up, secondary infections come up, that's very much a pulsatilla situation. Food and drinks, there's lots of really strong stuff here. They've got a strong sensitivity to fat. So you see that they desire things like cheeses, cold foods, creamy foods, ice cream, peanut butter, very fatty, rich kind of foods. But also they can be aggravated by fats and rich foods. There's a lot of gallbladder sensitivity, for example, in this medicines, Materia Medica. Also can have aversion to fats and rich foods, things like butter, pork, warm foods. Very fatty, very oily kind of stuff. Things that might upset a gallbladder would make us think of pulsatilla. Eye symptoms, it's a big conjunctivitis medicine. Allergies, sinus infections, stuff happening over the face, but especially that kind of conjunctivitis where people wake up with thick, gluey eyes stuck together with dark yellow, greenish, thick, bland kind of discharges, makes us think of pulsatilla. It's a huge ear infection medicine. We look at the ears, otitis media, massive. You'd be differentiating it from your belladonnas and your camomiles and your other kind of otitis media medicines. Worse at night time, worse for heat. Hearing can be diminished because of the infection. It's been a history of mumps or things like that previously. That can also be part of the timeline. Nose stuff, again, hay fever, sinuses, allergies, but bland yellow-green discharges is a big keynote here. Face flushes very easily, blushes easily, tend to be dry, thirstless. It's very much a thirstless medicine. People who've got a fever, for example, where they're very, very thirsty, you wouldn't think of pulsatilla. Pulsatilla is more like belladonna. They can have a fever with thirstlessness. There can be some kind of bowel symptoms. It's not super important in kids or not as characteristic, but you get diarrhea, changeable stools, cystitis kind of stuff also as a result of some bowel symptoms. Prostate symptoms, male symptoms are there too. We're not going to get into that right now because that's not our topic for the moment, but just good to point out this is not an exclusively female medicine. There's lots of male reproductive symptoms there too. Again, lots of female hormonal kind of stuff, and in kids you're going to be thinking about this particularly in female kind of puberty sort of stuff. Delayed first menses, delayed onset of menses. Menses that are easily suppressed, so they start their period and they might go get their feet wet, for example, and the period stops. Menses which can be painful, delayed, irregular, changeable, short, sexual desire increased, labour pains that are ineffectual, changeable, malpresentation of fetuses, like the keynote medicine in homeopathy for when you bulb in a breech position. You very often see, I use this a lot because I'm also an acupuncturist, so lots of people would come to an acupuncturist because they know acupuncture's got a good reputation for moving a bulb that's in breech position, and it would nearly always be pulsatilla would be the symptoms. They often find they get, they're thirstless, they start eating ice rather than drinking fluids. If they're drinking anything, they're drinking tea, which then makes them more dehydrated. They're getting quite weepy, they're getting quite emotional. Bulbs in that breech position, you just go through and go, all these symptoms at the moment are pulsatilla symptoms. I find a very large percentage of people approaching delivery with bulb in a breech position. It's pulsatilla very, very frequently. Iron deficiency, anemia, all this kind of stuff going on there. Big respiratory medicine, dyspnea, cough, especially again if they're coughing up the thick greeny kind of stuff. Extremities, pains that move all over the place, and some skin kind of stuff, and it's going to, again, a strong reputation with measles. So in those kind of acute infectious communicable diseases, there's a lot of stuff in the pulsatilla Materia Medica that fits into measles, and some of the more serious negative effects from measles, as well as kind of the simple uncomplicated measles. So that's pulsatilla, really useful one. It's a good one to know, but you're going to think most commonly those physical generals and mental symptoms are going to lead you towards it, along with kind of local things like thick, green, bland sort of discharges will make you think, oh, this is easy, I recognise this is pulsatilla, or you're talking to them in the consultation room and they start weepy, sad, looking for attention and a cuddle and some consolation. I think people who are looking for someone to give them that attention, we might think of pulsatilla sometimes just on the basis of that obvious desire for attention and consolation.